Thank you for joining us on NTV Weekend Edition. Ahead. Tonight, the world mourns the modern-day peacemaker.
We do have a deal.
As Kenyans remember Kofi Annan for pulling the country from the brink in 2007. Also tonight, the Deputy President's 2022 plea to Western Kenya leaders.
Sasa kwa sababu mimi nimekaribia, si mbali, nimebaki tu hatua moja nifike.
Plus, how members of parliament spent 20 million shillings to Russia to learn about the World Cup, but from the internet. We break down Parliament's latest Shoddy report. And in our special tonight,
utapata samaki, lakini baadaye ndio hiyo kimi sasa.
We bring you the mutually destructive sex for fish trade affecting the fishing industry in Homa Bay. Our sign language interpreter tonight is Flora Ateno. Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General and the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize for Humanitarian Work, passed on this morning in Bern, Switzerland. His family says he died peacefully following a short illness. Annan, who was born in Ghana in 1938, served as the 7th UN Secretary General from 1997 to 2006. He was the first African to take on the top job after rising from within the ranks of the United Nations staff. It is during his tenure that the world was facing the threats of global terrorism, and his efforts to combat those threats and secure a more peaceful world earned him a Nobel Peace Prize in 2001. His work post to the UN is remembered far and wide, including his role in brokering peace in Kenya during the 2007-2008 post-election crisis. Annan was also a member and the chairman of the Elders since 2007, a humanitarian group of leaders and activists formed by the late Nelson Mandela. He was also the founder and chairman of the Kofi Annan Foundation, which promotes better global governance and seeks to strengthen the capacities of countries to achieve a fairer, more peaceful world. Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta joined leaders from around the world in mourning the death of former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan. In a statement, President Uhuru Kenyatta condoled with his family, relatives and friends. He went on to say, and I quote, "My thoughts and prayers go out to them as they come to terms with this sad news." ODM party leader Raila Odinga acknowledged the role Annan played in helping Kenya pull itself out of the 2007-2008 post-election violence it had sunk itself into, saying Kenya retains fond memories of him as a man who stepped in and saved the country from collapse 10 years ago. Former President Mzee Daniel Arap Moi, on his part, described Annan in a statement as a man who ably represented the dignity of the Black African personality, and that the world has lost an international crusader of peace and human dignity. Current UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres describes his predecessor as a guiding force for good. In many ways, Kofi Annan was the United Nations. Like so many, I was proud to call Kofi Annan a good friend and mentor. Well, Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo has declared a week of mourning in Ghana, saying the national flag will fly at half-mast at home and in the country's diplomatic missions around the world in honor of Ghana's greatest compatriot. Addo went on to say that Annan brought considerable renown to Ghana by his position and through his conduct and comportment in the global arena. Further afield, British Prime Minister Theresa May also sent her thoughts and condolences to the family. She described Annan as a great leader and reformer of the UN who made a huge contribution to making the world he has left a better place than the one he was born into. This is just a snapshot of how the world reacted to his death, and his family has in the meantime requested for privacy during this period, saying arrangements to celebrate Kofi Annan's life will be announced later. The demise of the former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan has rekindled memories of the role he played in pulling Kenya back from the edge of the precipice it found itself on in the wake of the post-election violence of 2007. The Kofi Annan-led team not only brokered a peace deal but also set the ball rolling for the country's reform program. NTV's Brenda Wanga with more.
I announced earlier today, we do have a deal.
A statement that literally pulled the country from the brink of an abyss. 28 February 2008, after 39 days of negotiations between Mwai Kibaki's NARC and Raila Odinga's ODM following the disputed 2007 presidential elections, the former UN boss-led team had brokered a peace deal agreeable to all the parties on the table. But the journey to that deal had been anything but a walk in the park. Kofi Annan had been called into the country to quell the fires, quite literally, that threatened to consume the nation over the election. His team would take over from where the African Union team led by former Ghana President John Kufuor had left. His efforts to set the country back on track would run into headwinds time and again.
The government's position has always been that any agreement reached shall be in accordance and consistent with our current constitution.
We have done a lot of good work.
In his book, Interventions, A Life in War and Peace, released in 2012, the late Kofi details the behind the scenes of the negotiations, which he says was sometimes marked by what he called childish antics. He, for instance, talks about the fuss created about sitting arrangements in a mediation meeting, the insistence from the NARC side that President Mwai Kibaki sits on the presidential chair in the mediation meeting. This, he says, was in the midst of renewed fighting in the Rift Valley that had left over 60 people dead and the re-emergence of the Mungiki. He says, and I quote, "The lack of urgency and childish nature of these obstacles was something to behold. The politicians, meanwhile, were playing with chairs." End of quote. The antics notwithstanding, he led his team as they plowed through the intricate minefield that was the demands from both sides of the divide to emerge on the other side of the darkest period in Kenya's history victorious. He says in his memoir he confronted President Kibaki in a bid to pressure him to yield when the death toll from the violence rose to 1,000 people. This, he says, was his last plea.
We cannot pretend as if nothing has happened. We cannot pretend as if we can continue doing business as we used to. That is not an option.
And on the event of his death, those who were in the mediation room recalled the role he played in those talks.
This country and the international community is mourning the passing on of one of Africa's most distinguished sons, former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan. In fact, the second only after Boutros Ghali of Egypt. A man who brought peace to this country. A man who has been iconic in terms of his conduct of diplomatic affairs. Having served him before he became United Nations Secretary General, he was in charge of the peacekeeping department.
He led peace missions around the world, presided over resolution of conflicts around the whole globe, and made our people extremely proud. So we want to condole with his family, with the people of Ghana, the people of Africa and the rest of the world, for the loss of such a great son of the earth.
The leaders bemoaned his passing, stating that his peacemaking skills were still needed on the continent.
That you have left us too early because you are still doing so much for this continent.
What was done at Serena to save this country from a crisis, ile handshake iliyokuja kati ya Mheshimiwa Rais Kibaki na Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga in 2008 ilitokana na mazungumzo ya Serena.
So, Kofi Annan dies exactly 1 decade after he helped broker a peace deal in Kenya that set in motion a myriad of reforms, including a review of the constitution, a review of the land laws, amongst other issues, and the effect and impact of his work in Kenya continues to be felt years later. Brenda Wanga, NTV, Nairobi.
Well, we also sampled views from a cross-section of Kenyans on Kofi Annan's legacy in the country. Listen in.
This is a very sad news for some of us, people like me, who Kofi Annan has been my role model all along in peace issues.
Alikuwa mzee mzuri sana. Amefanya maendeleo nchi mingi. Sio hapa Kenya peke yake, ni nchi mingi.
Mwili ndio imeenda, lakini tuko na spirit ya Kofi Annan. Kutokezea na Kofi Annan mwingine. Asiende ati ameenda sasa tusikue na amani.
Aliokoa Kenya. Maanake watu walimwaga damu wengi, lakini kulingana na roho yake, alikuwa na roho ya utu, akatusaidia.
In fact, when he was the General Secretary of the United Nations, he really helped many people. I'll really remember him. May his soul rest in peace.
Tunaambia jamii ya Kofi Annan, poleni sana na Mungu awe pamoja na nyinyi. Wakenya tunakumbuka mtu wenu na tunampenda na tunamwombea Mungu.
Ile vita ilifanya akuje Kenya sana ni kutoka Naivasha. Juu hiyo vita yenye ilikuwa Naivasha ilikuwa kubwa sana. Wakaonelea hiyo vita ikizidi hapo Kenya itaharibika sana.
Kwa ile jambo lilipofanyika 2007 hatungependa irudie tena. Kwa hivyo kifo yake tutakuja kuikumbuka kama wana Kenya vile ambapo haitushikanisha.
Na tunaombea nchi zetu za Afrika wakati huu mgumu, hasa nchi ya Ghana. Tunawatakia kila laheri.
Kofi Annan ni kama Mkenya, ni kama ndugu yetu sisi kama Wakenya, kwa sababu alichangia kuleta amani.
Nobody would have known that between two humble Africans drinking in a bar next to the US, one of them would become Secretary General. But Kefi did become Secretary General, but he never forgot his friends. He was a humble man.
And still on the demise of Kofi Annan, he was the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations and the first black African to take up the role for almost 10 years. Annan, who was also awarded a Nobel Peace Prize in 2001, presided over some of the most turbulent periods for the world body, but his moral prestige remained largely undented, having negotiated with most of the world leaders across continents. NTV's Mel Miendo paints the portrait of Annan, the peacemaker.
The peace negotiations led by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan between retired President Mwai Kibaki and NASA leader Raila Odinga were done at the Serena Hotel, which is on my left, to be precise, the Amani Room. Now, at the time, Kofi Annan left Serena Hotel and walked all the way to Harambee House, where the agreement between the two leaders was made. This was just one of the many peace initiatives led by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan.
A peacekeeper, a diplomat-in-chief and a global statesman, Kofi Annan was perhaps a man of peace in a world of war.
We have reason to be worried about the state of the world. Honestly speaking, we are in a mess. The only way to resolve this conflict is to get the international community, the Permanent Five, working with the regional powers as well as the Syrian parties to find a solution. If we can work out a common framework where we all work along the same lines to implement it, we stand a chance.
This is the picture of a man who rose from a schoolboy in Ghana to world statesman and Nobel Peace Prize winner. In his memoir, Interventions, A Life in War and Peace, Annan recognized the cost of taking on the world's top diplomatic job, joking that SG for Secretary General also signified scapegoat around UN headquarters. Annan has been described as a pragmatic leader who almost religiously adhered to the spirit of the UN Charter during his stint as the chief functionary of the World Organization. But his first splash of the global news headlines was in 1990 when he persuaded Saddam Hussein to allow the repatriation of over 500,000 Kuwaiti workers who had been trapped there after the Iraqi invasion. Before then, he had spent most of his time pushing paper as a budget specialist in the UN. But under his watch as the Under-Secretary General in charge of the Department of Peacekeeping Operations at the UN, there was a spectacular rise in peacekeeping missions in the UN history. In 1998, he helped ease a transition to civilian rule in Nigeria and visited Iraq to try to resolve its impasse with the Security Council over compliance with weapons inspection and other matters. The effort helped avoid an outbreak of hostilities that seemed imminent at the time. The blot in his legacy would, however, come with the slaughter of approximately 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus in Rwanda when he was the UN peacekeeping chief. For him, it drove home the UN institutional weaknesses. He has also been criticized for his handling of the Bosnia massacre of 1995. In 2005, Annan succeeded in establishing the Peace Building Commission and the Human Rights Council. But that year, the UN was facing attacks over allegation of corruption. As special envoy to Syria in 2012, Annan won international backing for a 6-point peace plan. The UN deployed a 300-member observer force to monitor a ceasefire, but there was no peace and Annan was unable to surmount the bitter stalemate among Security Council powers. He joined an elite group of former leaders founded by the late Nelson Mandela, eventually succeeding Desmond Tutu as its chairman after the failed interlude trying to resolve Syria's rising civil war. Melmiendo, NTV.
May he rest in peace. Back home, members of Parliament's Sports Committee could have spent about 20 million shillings to travel to Russia to learn the history of the World Cup and the advantages of hosting such a huge tournament. Yes, it turns out that's all they learned. Now, the MPs are facing judgment for one of the most outrageous reports ever produced by a committee. The report, described as a joke, also borrowed quite heavily from the internet. NTV Silas Apollo dissects the report that is now a hallmark of a new all-time low moment for the august House.
Another classical example of a rip-off of taxpayers' funds by MPs, this time laid bare in a report whose contents are now subject of ridicule on the august House. Speaker of the National Assembly defended the jet-setting MPs and the Russia tour as an opportunity for our legislators to learn and help Kenya improve its football. But members of the National Assembly's Committee of Sports and Culture are on the spot for producing an inconsistent and incoherent report which lacks any tangible recommendation for the improvement of sports in the country. And just like their counterparts in the Joint Committee of Trade and Agriculture, who have now become synonymous with under-delivering, the Sports Committee ran up a staggering bill of about 20 million shillings just to learn about the history of the World Cup from the internet. The MPs lifted heavily from online sites like FIFA, Wikipedia and other sporting sites and blogs, putting to doubt the motive behind the trip. While one would expect that the committee would give practical proposals for the improvement of local sports to international standard, the report at best just details the history of the tournament and the teams that qualified for the 2018 edition, facts Kenyans already knew. The recommendations, on the other hand, are too idealistic, outrageous and lack practicability. Some of the outrageous ones include the provision of refreshment and snack for fans, refresher courses on crowd control for security personnel manning football matches, building of new world-class hotels and high-luxury tour buses to attract more football fans into the country. There is a further recommendation for preservation of historical sites which they argue would attract tourists and make the country ideal for hosting of international matches, an idea that dawned on them after their extensive tour of Russia's historical sites. They also want the government to improve cleanliness of major towns across the country, which they say is key towards helping the country win bids for hosting of the World Cup. It is no surprise, however, that while at it, the delegation failed to appreciate the country's role in hosting the 2017 Under-18 IAAF Athletics and the Under-20 IAA Athletics, which is set to be held in Nairobi next year. The trip to Russia had elicited anger from a section of Kenyans who accused the legislators of misusing taxpayers' funds at a time that most Kenyans still live on less than 100 shillings a day. Accusations that, going by the report, could be deemed justified. Silas Apollo, NTV.
And still on the Auditor General's audit queries, women representatives have been put on the spot for failing to account for about 4 billion shillings. The funds are said to have been misappropriated in the 11th Parliament. Now, the monies were part of the affirmative action, but which county committees failed to account for appropriately. Another 123 million shillings set aside for emergencies could also not be traced. Records of the committee's bank accounts were also not provided for audit examination, raising questions on whether funds were used for the purpose for which they were intended for. Now, documents on the county committee's expenditures and bank balances were also not provided for auditing purposes, and according to the report for the year, this is according to the report for the year ending June 2017. Away from that, the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, has given the developer of Dolphin Hotel in Shanzu 7 days to remove sand that has been leveled on a public beach. The authority had earlier in the day deleted a record on its website showing that Western Hotel had applied for the extension and alteration of the Dolphin Hotel, allegedly encroaching on sea land. The record has since been reinstated. Senior managers at the authority are also reported to have been dispatched to Mombasa to aid in investigations into the matter. Dolphin Hotel, whose ownership has remained a mystery for the last 2 years, was given an approval for a proposed alteration and an extension, a project that began in 2016. The county government of Mombasa has since said that it will release a report of the investigation into why the approvals of constructing in an area that is critical to marine life was done legally. Civil society groups insist that no individual is allowed to construct along the beaches since these are public areas. 2 NTV journalists were injured and detained earlier in the week while on a mission to seek the truth in the matter. President Uhuru Kenyatta has asked the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to work with other bodies mandated to fight corruption in the country, saying the war on graft should not be a source of competition among anti-graft agencies. The president, who held a closed-door meeting with all the EACC commissioners at State House, Nairobi, led by the chairman, that is Archbishop Eliud Wabukala, said the war on graft could only be won through a multi-agency partnership between the Commission, Directorate of Criminal Investigations and the Director of Public Prosecutions. Wabukala, the Commission had so far recorded or recovered corruption proceedings worth 4.7 billion shillings, and the President assured the EACC of his support in the war on graft amid reports that the Commission had been sidelined in the renewed fight against corruption. The taxpayer may have been conned of millions of shillings in yet another self-gain endeavor by corrupt government officials in the Ministry of Labour, who have been put on the spot for undervaluing assets before they were auctioned. The officials, including senior procurement officers, are said to have deliberately neglected procurement laws and abused their access to government tenders to profit from the sale of cars whose value was reduced by over half the market price. NTV's Silas Apollo with the details contained in the latest report by the Auditor General, Edward Ouko.
The report by the Auditor General Edward Ouko, one in a list of many done in government ministries and departments, is the latest indictment of those in public office, who some argue have become synonymous with graft. It details what it says are outright abuse of office where officials connive to reap from the taxpayer at the expense of laid down guidelines and procedures guiding the disposal of public properties and assets. The trend borrows from those of other government ministries and departments which have been put on the spot for similar crimes, albeit serious ones, by the Office of the Auditor General. Corrupt officials driven by selfish ambition and a desire for quick riches, profiteering themselves regardless of the consequences to the taxpayer. An audit of the Ministry of Labour for the year ending June 2017 says that the ministry devalued cars, some which were top-of-the-range vehicles, by over half the prices recommended. At least 17 vehicles, including a Volkswagen Passat and a Nissan Patrol, were all undervalued at 1.1 million shillings, selling at lower cost despite receiving bids of 3.9 million shillings during auctioning. The Volkswagen Passat had a reserve price of 30,000 shillings despite attracting a bid price of 100,000 shillings, while the Nissan Patrol was receipted at 250,000 shillings despite attracting a bid price of 1.3 million shillings. Most of the auction vehicles, despite having no physical damages, were undervalued against prices recommended by the Ministry of Transport. And that is not all. Ouko says it was also not clear how the auctioneers was procured due to various discrepancies in correspondences between the auctioneer and the head of procurement. And as if to add salt to injury, some of the winning bidders failed to pay the required 25% deposit at the fall of the hammer. In addition, fairly new vehicles were disposed of, leaving 8 old vehicles grounded in the department's yard. The ministry could have also lost over 1 million shillings due to the late payment of debts, as well as another 442 million shillings set for the building of a promotion centre in Kabete, but whose construction has since stalled.
The report by Uko is a trend that has otherwise become a norm in government institutions, where officials abuse their proximity to power for selfish gain, but which President Uhuru Kenyatta now says he will stop at nothing to correct. Silas Apollo, NTV.
National Lands Commission Chair Mohammed Swazuri has written to the head of Public Service Joseph Kenywa, accusing the state of infringing on his rights following his arrest by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission officials on Saturday, the 16th August 2018. Swazuri claims he was arrested by more than 21 officers who refused to show him a warrant. He also claims his and his wife's phones were confiscated at the time of their arrest. Now, Swazuri further says the decision to appoint the Commission's Vice Chair, Abigail Mukolwe, as acting chairperson is unconstitutional. He terms the actions against him as illegal, alleging a scam to oust him from the NLC helm. Swazuri's letter reads in part, both acts go against Article 250, Section 9 of the Constitution of Kenya, which provides that public officers cannot be paralyzed or punished in the course of their work if their actions are done in good faith. The statement reads further, the magistrate ordered that I should not go to my office unless accompanied by a police officer, and after consulting with the new management, that order has apparently been translated by the vice chairperson to mean I have been suspended or interdicted. Article 250 and 251 is clear on the process of appointment and removal or vacancy of the office of chairperson. End of quote. Swazuri is now urging for immediate intervention from the public service boss and was released on bail pending a court hearing on the matter. We take off our short break on NTV Weekend Edition. Much more coming your way right after this. Thank you for staying with us. The 2022 succession politics as well as the debate over contraband sugar took center stage at the homecoming ceremony of Lurambi MP Titus Hamala in Kakamega County. Deputy President William Ruto used the opportunity to ask for support for his 2022 from ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi and Raila Odinga. He says they owe him, but Mudavadi, who's also eyeing the presidency in 2022, will have none of it. Zacchaeus Musame was there and brings us this report.
Leaders including Deputy President William Ruto, ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi and Fort Kenya's Moses Wetangula met at the Mwangaza Primary Grounds in Lurambi constituency, Kakamega County, for the homecoming ceremony of the area legislator Bishop Titus Hamala. When he took to the podium, the Deputy President asked NASA leaders Raila Odinga and Musalia Mudavadi to pay the political debt they owe him since 2007.
Na naomba kwa unyenyekevu, sisemi kwa lazima. Lakini mzuri niseme ama ni namna gani? Heri niseme msiniambie siku ingine mbona ulikuwa na maneno na haukusema. Mimi nauliza nyinyi, mnaona hapo iko makosa kweli? Kwa sababu ile mimi niliwasaidia. Ule akakuwa prime minister, ule mwingine akakuwa deputy. Saa hii mimi ndio nimekaribia. Sasa wakiniunga mkono iko makosa. Sasa iko haja gani ya kusungukana tena? Simu nisaidie tu nifike haraka hivi, alafu maneno.
Sasa na Ruto amekuja kudai nyinyi mko na deni yake. Wache mambo ya kudai madeni bwana. Sisi hatuna deni lake. Tunaelewana kabisa. Lakini tunamheshimu kama Mkenya, si ndio? Na tekeleze kazi yake ya Mungu, sasa hiyo haijulikani. Lakini tuende tukijua hatuna deni lake.
Both leaders have their eyes on the presidency in 2022. The Deputy President has, however, been on a charm offensive in his many tours of Western Kenya. The leaders also weighed in on the sugar debate, slamming Parliament over claims that MPs were bribed to shoot down the report on investigations into the contraband sugar. The leaders say Parliament let down sugar farmers and the country.
Sasa kwa sababu wale walikuwa tu wamepiga selfie, hawakuuliza maswali. Hawakusema wewe hii sukari ambayo ulilete ni kiasi gani? Iko imefanywa utafiti kama it's fit for human consumption ama sivyo. Sasa report wakapeleka bunge. Nikasikia hiyo report ilipelekwa bunge haisemi mambo ya mercury. Mwenye kuimport sukari umewachana na yeye. Mwenye kulete kopa umewachana na yeye. Hujamuuliza maswali. Sasa waziri utakuja kumwambia aende wapi?
Sababu mambo ya sukari sio mambo ya mzaha. Ni mambo ambayo uchumi wa eneo hili lote linategemea. Sugar is the mainstay of our economy huku Western Kenya. Yeyote akidhuru uchumi wa eneo hili atakuwa ametua kiuchumi.
Kwa hivyo hii sukari ilikuwa ni mbaya kabisa. Na ndio sababu wakati mimi nimepitia ile ripoti nikaona yule ambaye alikuwa na makosa kubwa kabisa ni yule ambaye alisign gazette notice bila kuweka qualities, na yule wa kusaini hiyo anaitwa Rotich. Na ndio maana mimi nimeleta mswada ya kupeleka Rotich nyumbani.
NC leader Musalia Mudavadi maintains that the president should form a commission of inquiry for the country to get to the bottom of the sugar scandal.
50,000 metric tons. Sasa mimi nilikuwa na ngoja nisikize Mheshimiwa Rais Deputy Ruto akisema kwamba amesikia mwito wa wajumbe wa eneo la miwa, amesikia mwito wa wakulima wa miwa, ataenda kuambia Uhuru ambaye ni bosi yake kwamba watu wanaumia kule, wewe unda hii tume ya Judicial Commission of Inquiry, imalize hii maneno tujue nini inafanyika.
Zacchaeus Musame, NTV, Kakamega.
Staying with politics, Charles Kamuren has pledged to work with all leaders in Baringo South to ensure unity in the constituency. Kamuren spoke after he was declared Member of Parliament-elect in the just concluded by-election. Kamuren of Jubilee Party received 12,277 votes to trounce Maendeleo Chapchap's Cynthia Kipchilat, and Bridget Ngana recaps the by-election, which she said had some drama after the announcement of the final results.
Vote counting and tallying took place overnight at Marigat High School. By early morning, the winner of the Baringo South by-election was announced.
Kamuren Charles, 12,277. 12,277. Kipchilat Cynthia Cherotich, 8,968. 8,968.
Kamuren's victory was met with some resistance. Maendeleo Chapchap's Cynthia Kipchilat's chief agent refusing to append his signature on Form 35B, citing irregularities in one of the 132 polling stations. In his acceptance speech, Kamuren assured his constituents that he would work towards uniting the area leaders.
Na hii ushindi sio yangu, ni ushindi ya wakaaji wa Baringo South. Nataka niwaombe wale wote tulikuwa na shindana pamoja, tuwe kama jamii moja, tufanye kazi kama jamii na tuungane mikono. Pamoja na viongozi wote walio Baringo Kusini, tusaidiane kwa mpangilio ya kazi sasa.
Our success today, tukiwa hapa Marigat, inaonyesha ya kwamba chama chetu cha Jubilee ni chama ambacho imeimarika katika kaunti yetu ya Baringo.
According to the IEBC, the voter turnout was at 61% of the total number of registered voters. The successful conclusion of the by-elections here in Baringo South has seen the people here choose Charles Kamuren as their representative to Parliament. In the coming 4 years, what remains to be seen is how Cynthia Kipchilat will follow up her refusal to sign the final results form from this by-election. Bridget Ngana, NTV, Baringo County.
Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Nduta, President Uhuru Kenyatta's new assistant aide-de-camp, created a buzz on social media yesterday for being the first female official shadow, if you will. So what do the people who normally stand behind the president do? What is their day like? While Leila Mohammed set out to find the answers from a man who's been there before, former President Kenyatta's aide-de-camp, retired Major Mazden Madoka.
Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Nduta Kamui of the Kenya Air Force lit up social media when she shadowed President Uhuru Kenyatta for the Music Festival's Winners Gala. She is President Kenyatta's new assistant aide-de-camp and will work side by side with her Navy counterpart, Lieutenant Colonel Timothy Lekolul, in catering to the President's needs. It is a job we try to demystify through the man who's been the country's first President's shadow. Former ADC retired Major Mazden Madoka says the officer's day-to-day work depends on his Commander-in-Chief's itinerary. He gives us a sneak peek into their typical day, gleaning from his own experiences at State House.
In my time, when the President came in the morning, I will go with him to his office. We'll look at his day's schedule. He will tell me what he may want, any additional things, and I will brief him of what I know is actually going to happen, and from there I leave his office and prepare to bring in all the guests who are coming to see him. I never sat in those meetings. When they finished, I'll escort the visitor out, and that was done.
Despite being the man always behind the president, he says this duty is largely ceremonial and has little to do with the president's protection.
Many people will say ADC is a bodyguard to the president. He is not a bodyguard. The security of the president is under the presidential escort commander. The ADC's role is to basically be an aide to the president. The ADC is not a personal assistant as such.
We are mainly in the backsides and in the sidelines, but the aide-de-camp is an integral part
of the presidential life. And for the man who stood behind former President Jomo Kenyatta, he now says that being an aide-de-camp is not necessarily being under the presidential shadow, but also is an important job. But then again, one should not stay in that position for a very long time, and this is for importance of development in their career.
Even in terms of your own career development, you lose because, like I know, before I went to be ADC, I was to go on a course in the UK for military intelligence to be followed by staff college. So I missed those opportunities.
Despite being close to the country's most powerful man, he's not involved in every aspect of his life. He says his bodyguards play an integral part in the president's life.
Even if he goes to the restroom, the person who stands around nearby are the security people.
Retired Major Madoka, however, feels that low-ranking officers in the military should take up such duties.
During our time, an ADC was a captain. You started as a captain because it is ceremonial.
Leila Mohammed, NTV.
A great piece to camera by Leila Mohammed, and of course kudos to Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Nduta, a literal sense of women and power. Well, that will be coming your way later on in the bulletin. Before now, we'll take another short break. Welcome back. Chaos erupted at the Takai Kingston village in Malindi town when police officers engaged residents who are demonstrating over alleged grabbing of a public land by a private developer in running battles. The residents were protesting against a tycoon they accused of allegedly grabbing 30 acres pieces of land in Takai Kingston land. They had teamed up with local activists when they marched to the Deputy County Commissioner's office demanding that action be taken against the tycoon. Police were forced to use tear gas to disperse the protesters who had lit bonfires along the road.
Saa hii amejitokeza kusema hiyo shamba ni yake, ashavunja nyumba za watu, mashamba na kushika watu. Juzi na kesi kokotini ni tarehe 28 mwezi wa 9, waliongea uongo wao wa kusema washaika tayari bacon, na ni uongo mtupu ambao wameuweka.
In Rusinga Island, Homa Bay County, a reluctant trade thrives on the shores of Lake Victoria. With no other sources of income, women are often forced to trade sex with the fishermen for a share of their catch. Sex for fish, locally known as jaboya, has been blamed for the rise in HIV infections in the county. But a group of women in Homa Bay have come together to help in the fight against new infections and curb the practice by going out into the deep waters themselves to save a living. Bernard Ojwang with more.
As the sun sets, fishermen residing along the beaches here in Rusinga Island prepare to cast their nets into Lake Victoria. Their fishing vessels are all ready, and soon the owners will board them and set sails into the dark waters. This is Sienga Beach. It is around 8 p.m. Before going to the deep waters, the fishermen have to take care of some other more sinister and dangerous business. They engage with the women fishmongers who are keen to secure the best catch in the morning when the boats come in after a night of fishing. These women put their bodies on sale quite literally. Competition for the best fish is stiff, and so the women have no qualms about trading sex for the catch. This is what guarantees their survival here on the beach.
This woman to get fish, she must have a person who is related to him for him to get fish. So she will be the first person to get fish before even the owner of the boat, the woman of the boat, gets fish.
Kama umempata na samaki hawezi kukupatia kama hujaenda ulale na yeye. Lazima ulale na yeye ndiye akupatie samaki moja ukuje ukule. Na sasa hiyo tunaona inazidi mambo ya ukimwi.
For the past 5 years, Pamela Atieno, a 35-year-old widow and a mother of 6, has sold fish on the Kenyan shores of Lake Victoria. Like many other women in the fish trade, Pamela often had to pay with her body to get the prized fish, a system known in the local Luo language as jaboya.
Mimi yenyewe bwana yangu ilikufa. Nilibaki na watoto 6, mimi peke yangu. Jaboya kakuja kanidanganya. Tuizi na yeye. Tumeizi. Analeta samaki tunakula. Analeta samaki tunakula. Akisaona mimi nimeregea, amekimbia, ametafuta mwingine, ameniacha hapo, nateseka na watoto. Wanatafuta wanawake ingine wako nayo kando.
She was aware of the risks, but the immediate needs of her family override any concern she could have about contracting HIV.
Ukikosa kupata jaboya, utapata maisha mzuri. Ukipata jaboya unavaa mzuri, watoto yako nakula. Wewe unaendelea vizuri kwa nyumba yako na kesho yake hakuna.
Sex for fish continues to be one of the greatest challenges in the prevention of HIV in Nyanza, especially along the beaches here in Rusinga Island, Mfangano, Ringiti, Remba, Takawiri, amongst others. A majority of the women who engage in this practice are driven to the flesh for fish trade due to the economic and social vulnerabilities. Even when a female fishmonger establishes herself with one fisherman, it often doesn't last long, as young fishmongers appears on the scene and the older ones are dumped for the newer, younger catch from Nairobi, Migori, Kisii, Oyugis and Rongo.
Hao wamama walikuwa wajaboya saa hizi wamewachwa kwa sababu wanataka wenye wamejivaa, wenye wametengeneza kichwa, wenye wamejipaka mafuta.
Mwingine analea mtu wa Nairobi amechukua, ama mtu wa Kisii amechukua. Sasa hiyo ndio kitu inatusumbua sasa hivi, mpaka hatujui hii conflict itaisha vipi.
Wanawake natoka mbali, natoka Kisii, Nairobi, Kisumu, umekuja hapa. Usifikirie sisi tulikuwa hivi tumeparara. Sisi tumetumiwa hiyo jaboya. Utapata jaboya hapa, utapata samaki, lakini baadaye ndio hiyo ukimwi sasa.
Here, age doesn't matter, lust is in control.
Hataki kujua wewe ni mwanamke peke yako, bwana yako amekufa, hataki kujua mwanaume iko.
Leo atakuanzia na chapa, kesho hana chapa. itabidi kesha kuambia bana na kuita ndani ya keja, njoo chukue chapati ndani ya keja. Ukifika ndani ya keja utapata amekuwekea thermos, amekuwekea chapati, amekuwekea maragwe. Next time ukienda atakwambia sasa vipi? Saa hii saa 3, kwani unaenda wapi? Si tulale. Sasa ushaanza kulala naye, amekuwa wife wako.
Perhaps tired of being under the mercy of fishermen, a group of women are now venturing into the deep waters themselves. Every morning, they load their fishing boats with their gears and cast their nets into the lake. Their mission here is to ensure that there are less women who depend on the men to get fish to sell. Amongst them, Pamela, after completing house chores every morning, she takes her tools of trade and joins her colleagues on the shores of Lake Victoria. Well, along the lake shores in most, the best catch will go for those women who are ready to offer sex, something that has really contributed to high rate of new infections here in Homa Bay County. But here in Rusinga Island, a group of women who have suffered in the hands of Jaboya have come together to help in the fight against this vice by going to the lake themselves, something that has really created conflict between them and fishermen.
Tumeamua tufanye kazi. Tuwache mambo ya Jaboya. Tuwache mambo ya Jaboya tunamaliza.
The practice of Jaboya has long been associated with high levels of HIV infections in Nyanza, especially along the beaches. And according to the National AIDS Control Council 2016 report, Homa Bay County, that has a population of 1.1 million, has a HIV prevalence of 4.5% times higher than the national one. That stands at 26%. Women in the county make a higher percentage of these infections. Panado Juang, NTV Rusinga, in the county of Homa Bay.
Haluta continue to those women in Homa Bay. Another short break on NTV Weekend Edition. We'll be back with Women in Power. In March of this year, Liz Lenjo became the youngest member to sit on the Competent Authority Tribunal established under the Copyright Act of Kenya. The tribunal is tasked with listening and determining disputes between the Kenya Copyright Board and representatives of musicians and book authors in the country. Her journey to this point has been very deliberate, heavily bolstered by her love for the arts, which started way back in college. I spent time with Liz and found out that this advocate of the High Court is literally a Jill of all trades in this week's Women in Power.
Well, first of all,
We meet Liz Lenjo, teaching a media law and ethics class at the Strathmore University.
We have to show that it was justified.
Her petite frame and knowledge on the subject matter makes her gel easily with the students.
In Kenya, we don't directly have provisions of parody.
An advocate of the High Court, Liz specializes in intellectual property, entertainment, sports, fashion and media law. A space that she was pushed into when her love for the arts hit a snag while pursuing her bachelor's degree in law.
My ideal career would have been a dancer. But my parents thought, oh my gosh, the arts, there's no way our child is going to go into the arts, they'll be broke. So I continued dancing, singing a little bit here and there. Then when I was in university, I was doing my undergrad at Catholic University. They had Mr. and Miss Catholic University, and I thought, why not? Being a pageant queen back in the day when I was in university was very exciting. It came with a lot of opportunities, representing the university, working with a lot of campus brands. So that sort of put me out there. And as I was doing my modeling thing, I was now exposed to singing, and I got a record deal. But then it went south because lawyers didn't understand the space. And then that now led me to start thinking about the legal space in the entertainment sector.
This need quickly led to a love for writing that essentially handed her the key to the world of intellectual property law.
When I realized there was no information, I said, oh, let's start blogging. And at that time I had met my husband, and he was one of those pioneering bloggers. And I started talking about rights in entertainment space. Rights, entertainment even cuts across media. How do you handle yourself when you're doing a blog, when you're releasing your music? What do you need to consider? And those are the conversations I started having. At the time, I was the only female law blogger. And we were only 2 law bloggers, myself and IP Kenya. And then my blog was nominated for the Blog Awards Topical Blog of the Year twice, which was interesting because people don't like to read, especially law stuff. Kikao Law was born when people said, you know what, Liz, maybe now you should start representing us more. And I had done this pro bono for a while.
Kikao Law, a boutique legal services firm, was born 3 years ago to 2 young managing partners who are also former models, qualities that at times worked against them.
You look pretty, so people have decided pretty is not intelligent. We've even had clients just switch cancel, and then you get an email and they say, oh, facilitate so and so with the following information, and you're like, when did you fire me?
This 32-year-old was recently appointed as a member of the Competent Authority Tribunal established under the Copyright Act of Kenya, tasked with listening and determining copyright disputes between the Kenya Copyright Board and collective management organizations.
Then when we did the orientation with other tribunals, that's when I realized I was the youngest member there. And I even talked to the judiciary officials and I asked them, yeah, I know tribunals are about special skill and special knowledge. Is there anyone my age? And they said,
a mother, a wife, lawyer, part-time lecturer are just but a few of the hats that Liz wears. She attributes her achievements to mentorship.
I remember even just in university, having a mentor was almost impossible. Especially for us women, I don't know why we are so averse to mentoring. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do it differently. I had male friends who have had mentors since we were in high school, and they're doing so well. And the kind of conversations that they have are impressive. And I said, I need to do that. And I need to be real also. Because mentorship is also about being real with your people. I mean, I can't just sell a success story and I'm not telling you about the struggles. I wouldn't be doing you justice, yeah? So that's what I do with my mentorship. And I meet them from Facebook, Twitter. I meet them from class, at forums I speak at. I have like so many mentees. I even lost count, and most of them are not even lawyers.
The sporting action is coming up with Brian O'Twell right after this.
Welcome to NTV Sport. My name is Brian Otual. The national Free Prince rugby team will have to overcome Canada, Germany and Hong Kong in the global repechage set for November in France to make it to the 2019 Rugby World Cup. This follows a 53-38 loss to Namibia in the final Africa Gold Cup match played in Windhoek. And moving on, former world cross-country champion Agnes Jebet Tirop pulled off a surprise when she defeated African and world 5,000 meters champion Helen Obiri in the women's 3,000 meters in the 12th meet of the Diamond League in Birmingham. Tirop clocked 8 minutes 32.21 seconds. Lilian Kasait was second with Obiri third. It was a top 4 Kenyan sweep in the men's 800 meters with Africa's silver medalist Emmanuel Korir leading the Jonathan Kitilit, while 1500 meters champion Elijah Manangoi and Ferguson Rotich. World champion Conseslus Kipruto fended off Ethiopian opposition to win the men's 3,000 meters steeplechase in a time of 8 minutes 14.33 seconds. The Diamond League next heads to Zurich and Brussels on the 30th and 31st of August.
Skip over that barrier. Most all summer long, winning in Doha, the opening Diamond League meeting of this 2018. Seems more concerned with what's happened to Keegan than running on and winning the race. Bayo challenging for the final barrier. These two well away from the rest of them now, but Conseslus Kipruto wins it comfortably. 8:40.
And legendary athletics coach Colm O'Connell, who is based in Iten, has today been fitted for his service to the Kenyan athletics with a street in Iten named after him. Initially, the coach landed in the country in the 1970s as a teacher at St. Patrick's Iten before transitioning into athletics. He has coached a number of Kenyan stars over the decades, including Mary Keitany, Lona Kiplagat, Edna Kiplagat, Vivian Cheriot, David Rudisha, among others. Uasin Gishu Governor Jackson Mandago and his Elgeyo Marakwet compatriot Alex Tolgos led athletes and residents of the counties in celebrating Brother Con.
Opportunity to be able to bring out that talent and to be able to nurture it is a very, very satisfying experience.
And we want to congratulate you for dedicating your time and your life to improving the lives of the citizens of this county. And I can tell you by extension, I'm the greatest beneficiary.
But I'm happy. A lot of my classmates and other people who went through St. Patrick's, and even Singora girls and all the schools around this place, they got an opportunity to train as athletes, courtesy of Brother Colm.
And Gor Mahia is going all out for a win against Rayon Sport in the CAF Confederation Cup Group D match to be played on Sunday under the Kasarani's floodlit. While Rothe Kiru caught up with the team in training earlier today and filed this report.
Gor Mahia going through their paces at the Moe Stadium Kasarani ahead of their match against Rayon Sport in the CAF Confederations Cup, knowing that they need just a point to get through to the last 8.
No, we can't play for a draw. We've got to go into this game purely on the focus. We need to win.
Kwa kuwa bado group iko open, bado Rayon wanaweza shinda, bado mechi mbili wanaweza shinda hapa, washinde Tanzania wanaweza kuwa wametupata kwa points. Game inaenda kuwa ngumu sana, so sika players lazima tutungangane tupate positive result kesho.
Gor Mahia won the Mandela Cup in 1987, and for coach Delan Carr, he seeks to write his name in the club's history books.
That if we get to the quarterfinals and we win that quarterfinal, I think we'll get to the final.
Kwanza nikuje Gor Mahia nimecheza CAF mechi mingi, lakini this season naona tumeimprove sana kufika quarterfinal. Maybe katafika hapo quarterfinal, which is possible. Itakuwa advantage sana pia kwa maybe kwa CV zetu kwa wachezaji.
With the games coming thick and fast, Gor Mahia has had to grapple with the player injuries.
Ephraim, no, I think it was an absolute amazing challenge. I mean, it was stupid. I tell you what, it was very, very brave because he wanted to score. We've got a couple, Boniface, the goalkeeper, we're going to assess him today, as well as Jax Tuisenga, because he's been out for the last 2 games.
For a long time, Kenyan clubs have not had a good run in continental assignments, but Gor Mahia is seeking to change the narrative, and a win or a draw against Rayon Sport of Rwanda will see them sail into the last 8 of the CAF Confederation Cup 2018. Rothe Kiru, NTV.
And Nakumatt Hamad Mathare United 4-0 at the Kamtoyoyo grounds in the peak of Saturday's Kenyan Premier League matches. Meanwhile, FC Leopards piled more misery on relegation threatened Thika United with a 2-0 win at the Thika Stadium, while Nzoia Sugar and Sofapaka drew 2-2 at Sudi. On Sunday, Kariobangi Sharks take on Sony Sugar at the Kamtoyoyo. Posta Rangers play Ulinzi Stars. Tusker host Zoo Kericho, and Vihiga United take on Kakamega Homeboys. And Kwantanza defended their East African Girls Volleyball title when they overcame GS Indagaburezi of Rwanda 3-0 in the final in Musanze district in Rwanda. And as Yoshua Makori reports from Musanze, there is a chance for more Kenyan glory as Kwale Girls play Kawempe of Uganda in the girls football final tomorrow.
Brookside East Africa Games highlights brought to you by Brookside.
Volleyball girls defending champions Kwantanze easily retained their East Africa title with a 3-0 win over GS Indagaburezi of Rwanda. Kwantanze won 25-22, 25-23 and 25-19 to bag their 4th title. In the boys volleyball final, Malava of Kenya will play St. Joseph's of Rwanda tomorrow. Kenya's hopes of glory in girls football lie with Kwale Girls. The national champions qualified for tomorrow's final after overcoming Mkono of Uganda 3-0. Captain Elizabeth Kioko scored twice as Marceline Simiyu scored once.
My girls played according to the instructions, and we were able to punish Mukono for the mistakes that they were making, especially on their defensive phase. I knew that it was a very tactical team.
Kulikuwa na sliding mistake ya defense, lakini tukaongea, then after that kwa kuwa na meeting, so leo ikakuwa mazee lazima tu prove Kenya hata kama si wadogo tubeba cup ya national, we deserve to take this cup of East Africa.
In the final, Kwale will face Kawempe Muslim of Uganda, who beat GS Ramera of Rwanda 5-3 in the post-match penalties after a goalless draw in regulation. In the boys semi-final, national champions Kakamega High went down 2-0 in the hands of LDK of Rwanda. The Green Commandos will face BS Kimanya of Uganda in the 3rd playoff. Kimanya lost 5-3 in post-match penalties to their fellow countrymen Budo after barren draw in regulation time. Yoshua Makori, NTV, Musanze Stadium, Rwanda.
Brookside is calling out to young talented students for an opportunity to win a university scholarship. Participate in the Brookside East Africa Games in Musanze, Rwanda and get scouted. Score an A- in KCSE or its equivalent for those from our East African countries to get shortlisted. Brookside Dairy, nurturing sports talent and academics.
And Menengai Cream Homeboys' quest to win its 3rd leg in a row of the Stanbic National 7 circuit is alive after the DJs danced into the quarterfinals of the Kabeberi Sevens. Meanwhile, Kenya won 4 bronze medals as the Africa Youth Chess Championship ended on Saturday in Kisumu, while the first leg of the Safari Tour gets underway on Sunday at the Nyali Golf and Country Club.
KCB, Homeboys, Mwamba and Kabras avoided defeats on day 1 of the Kabeberi Sevens tournament at the Machako Stadium on Saturday. They were joined in the last 8 by Nakuru, Kenya Harlequins, Mean Machine and Black Blood. Homeboys are the current leaders of the National Sevens circuit after winning the first 2 legs of Prinsloo and Sepetuka. Kenyans Gosrani Naya, Janvi Nipul Shah and Shah Dev Bijesh won bronze medals on the final day of the 2018 Africa Youth Championship that concluded on Saturday in Kisumu County. The trio will be part of the team that will represent Africa in the forthcoming World Youth Chess Championship in Georgia in September. Kenya finished 4th overall behind winners Algeria, South Africa and Egypt. Professional and amateur golfers took to the greens at the Nyali Golf and Country Club on Saturday for the Pro-Am ahead of the first leg of the Safari Tour. The pros tee off on Sunday and will play until Wednesday with 1 million Kenya shillings in prize money up for grabs. The tour is owned and run by the Kenya Open Golf Limited and it will feature a total of 8 events, most of them to be played in Nairobi and Thika. Baka Bona defended their under-21 title, while refugees emerged the winners of the under-18 category as the annual 7-a-side Gold Cup tournament concluded at the Hillcrest School in Karen. The two-day competition, hosted by Green Sports Africa, attracted 200 teams with 40 selected players set to join a camp where the best will bag a 4-year sports scholarship in the USA.
And further assist Marcos Alonso's late strike handed Chelsea a narrow.
And my name is Gladys Gachanja. Thank you for your company, and a special thank you to Flora Ateno, who was our sign language interpreter tonight. Well, have a good evening, but remember, Jamrock is next with Miss Katiwa.